Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach. With the UFL regular season officially over, that means that players from teams that did not make the playoffs can now officially start to get tryouts from NFL teams. It has already happened with one player. DC Defenders wide receiver Brandon Smith is getting a tryout with the Philadelphia Eagles of the NFL. So I'm just gonna want to go over some other players that I think could get NFL tryouts or be invited to NFL camps from teams that did not make the playoffs. I'm gonna start off with Luis Perez, quarterback from the Arlington Renegades. He had a very, very good season this year. He led the UFL in passing touchdowns and passing yards. He's also somebody that has some experience in NFL training camps, most recently with the Rams in 2022. He's somebody that has really been constantly trying to get to the NFL, and he's somebody that I think could get another shot and be invited to a training camp this season. Next player I think is Sal Cannella, the tight end for the Arlington Renegades. Cannella led the UFL in receiving touchdowns. He's also a former basketball player, and he's a very big and athletic tight end. So I think he could be a very good red zone threat in the NFL. Not so much as a blocking style tight end, but more of a receiving threat tight end that would work very well in the red zone. Next up, I have Donald Payne, linebacker for the Arlington Renegades. Donald Payne was fourth in tackles this season for the UFL, and he's a player that in 2022 was an all USFL player. So he's a very talented player. He has some NFL experience. So he's a player that I think could be very good on special teams and kind of a role player on defense with his experience and having played in the NFL. I believe he's got 30 games played in the NFL, so he has some experience at that level. So I think he'd be a very good role player or special teams player in the NFL. Moving on, some players from the DC Defenders that I think could get invited to NFL camps. First and foremost, their quarterback, Jordan Teamu. Teamu was second in passing yards this season for the UFL and third in passing touchdowns. In 2023, he was the XFL Offensive Player of the Year. He's had some shots at the NFL, never really making it more than on the practice squads for short periods of time or in training camps. But he's still a very talented player, and he's relatively young. He's only like 26 years old, so he's got some time to develop if a team wants to bring him in and have him be maybe a backup for a little bit. So Jordan Teamu is a player that I think if he gets a shot, I think if he gets a shot, he could stick with an NFL roster. The next player I have is Chris Rowland, a wide receiver and kick returner for the DC Defenders. This season he led the UFL in all-purpose yards and scored the only kick return touchdown of the season. So a big reason I think he might be invited to a camp is the fact that the NFL is adapting their playoff rule or their kickoff rule to be more like the XFL style of kickoff. And that could open the door for more explosive kickoff returns, more kickoff returns than there have been recently. So Chris Rowland is a player that could get invited to a camp to kind of try out to be a kick returner more so than he would be a wide receiver. But as a kick returner, he's very explosive. I think that would be a path for him to make an NFL roster. Next player I want to talk about is Malik Fisher, a defensive end from the DC Defenders. He's a player that was third in the UFL in sacks, and he's already got apparently some interest from NFL teams, as he is a good young pass rusher, which is something that NFL teams are always looking for. They're always looking for pass rushers, and they really like, young pass rushers that have the ability to get after the quarterback, which Malik Fisher does. Moving on to some other players from the Memphis Showboats. Dawood Davis, wide receiver from the Showboats. This season he was tied for second in receiving touchdowns, and he was 7th in receiving yards. He's a player that I think could be kind of a deep threat, kind of playmaker style wide receiver if given a shot on a team. He's a player that he spent 2023 training camp with the Miami Dolphins, and unfortunately got injured towards the end of training camp, so wound up not making the team and wound up going to the UFL and the Memphis Showboats. But he's a player that I think, given a shot, could kind of be a big play, deep threat receiver on a team. Another player I have is another wide receiver for the Memphis Showboats. That's Vinny Papali. Vinny was also tied for second in receiving touchdowns with Dawood Davis, and he was 7th in receptions. Like, he's a player that could be a good slot receiver in the NFL. Not very much like an outside guy, but maybe a slot receiver, like punt return type of player. A guy that you could get him in the slot and get him in open space in the middle of the field, and he can make plays. Next up, I want to talk about Matt Coughlin, the kicker for the Showboats. So Matt Coughlin has played 2 seasons of spring football. He was in the USFL in 2023, and obviously the UFL this year. In those 2 seasons, he has only missed a total of 3 field goals. He was 34 of 37 over 2 seasons. I believe this year he was 16 of 18. So he's a very accurate kicker. He's a very efficient kicker, and I think NFL teams are really always looking for kickers. There are guys that teams that have had kicking struggles last season would definitely look for a guy to replace who they currently have, and I think Matt Coughlin could be a guy that could find his way at least into an NFL camp. Last players I want to talk about are from the Houston Roughnecks. First off is running back Mark Thompson. Mark Thompson was 2nd in rushing touchdowns this season. He scored 5 touchdowns and he only played in 7 games. So he's a very good power back, has really a nose for the end zone. In 2023 in the USFL, when he was fully healthy, he was their offensive player of the year. And I just think he's a guy that could really be, not necessarily a featured back, but definitely a role player, power back for teams that really like to run the ball and be physical on offense. And a few teams that I thought of that he would fit well in is the Baltimore Ravens, who behind Derrick Henry don't really have a whole lot of running back depth. The Los Angeles Chargers, who with Jim Harbaugh are going to want to run the ball a bunch. And they've got Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who have a history of injury, so maybe getting a third guy in there that's a similar type running back could be good for them. And the Las Vegas Raiders, who recently just lost their number 1 running back, Josh Jacobs, in free agency, and kind of bring in another guy as a role player behind Zamir White and Alexander Madison. And the final guy that I want to talk about is Justin Hall, the wide receiver for the Houston Roughnecks. Justin Hall was 3rd in receiving yards in this past season for the UFL. He was actually 1st in receptions, and he was 9th in receiving touchdowns. Which, the receiving touchdowns could be he was barely top 10 receiving touchdowns, but the Houston Roughnecks offense was not good. They were bottom of the league or close to bottom of the league in every offensive statistic, and did not score a whole lot of points. And clearly, if they got in scoring position, a lot of times they were giving the ball to Mark Thompson. But Justin Hall is kind of another guy that I think could be kind of a slot receiver, a little bit more dynamic of a slot receiver than Vinny Papali. But again, a guy that if you give him the ball in open space, he can make plays. If you find ways to get him the football, he can make plays. Another guy that could possibly make a team as a kick returner under the new kickoff rules. So those are just some guys that I thought from non-playoff teams could have shots at, getting tryouts or invitations to NFL camps. Let me know, guys, that you think could get shots from non-playoff teams in the comments below. I will be talking about players from playoff teams that I think could make NFL rosters. We're going to do that after the playoffs are over, or kind of talk about it in a later video, maybe before the XFL champion or before the UFL championship game. So let me know if there's any guys that I didn't talk about that you think should get invited to NFL camps. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, see ya.